Champions are masters of melee combat, and they deal significant damage to their enemies. A champion may choose to fight in rapid and fierce one-on-one combat with an opponent, or wield their blades to deal massive damage to all nearby foes. AKA, they truly do have the best melee AoE abilities, or at least, sword fighting AoE abilities. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of classes that do have a good chunk of AoE skills and have pretty significant AoE damage, like Minstrels, Lore Masters, Rune Keepers, for example. But these are all longer range classes. So when it comes to just, more hand-to-hand combat or short range, champions do have really good melee AoE abilities. With each strike, their fervor increases, which allows them to use their most potent skills. And Fellowship's a champion's role is to deal considerable damage to the forces of evil. Champions may alternatively choose to serve as a tank, drawing enemies' focus to themselves and sustaining against relentless attacks. So pretty much a champion can be a very good solo combat warrior. They are very well noted for having dual wielding swords, but you can also play a champion with a two-handed weapon, which is really, really cool. Now, I will say in terms of just, solo gameplay, they're great as a warrior, and also they are pretty good in raids or group content for tanks as well. And something I really like about champion tanking that makes them almost unmatched in comparison to other classes, except for Guardian, is that champions can serve as tanks, obviously, but they do get a lot of heals. So you'll get a lot of heals as a champion, especially when you're tanking, which can only help you really, and a lot of them are pretty good buff heals that are more life-saving, so that's good if in case your healer goes down or whatnot, which isn't really too different from the other classes. But here's the kicker: champions actually get a skill that allows them to have their power restored. What I mean by that is that there is a skill that will pretty much allow you to regenerate your power, a lot of power. I think it's over half for the most part. So whenever I play as a champion tank, it quite literally is heal, obviously I have someone healing me, but sometimes they're just busy healing everybody else. So I'm able to take damage because I have heavy armor on. I'm allowed to do really significant damage. Obviously as a tank you do a little bit less in comparison to other classes, but that's besides the point. And I do have a significant amount of aggros that allow me to be a tank, obviously with a champion, but I almost have this endless loop of significant heals if the healer is not able to help me out in time, but also I can even increase my power with a skill, which is crazy. It's almost like this big loop where you can just endlessly tank with the champion, and it's really cool. They're great tanks for grouping stuff, so keep that in mind for you. The lore reads as follows for champions. They say that they're unrelenting in battle. Champions are the consummate warriors. A champion cares not for their own well-being, but relies instead on strength and prowess to slay the enemy before they can bring further destruction to Middle-earth. Pretty much, I would almost think of champions almost like your go-to warrior type, but also if a warrior and a guardian had a baby, that would be the champion. That's the best way I can explain it in terms of what other MMOs would kind of categorize it under. Now, what the class is based off of for champion is actually based off of Gimli. You guys, I love Gimli. I freaking love him. But if you're not aware, Gimli, he is one of the best freaking warrior dwarfs there is, at least in A Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and of course, Return of the King. But Legolas and him had a great time. The class difficulty is actually labeled as basic, and I would actually very agree with this. Champions really aren't that complicated to learn, but there are some advanced techniques you can make or do with them, but it kind of depends on your playstyle. It really doesn't take a lot of time to understand how their abilities work, and you pretty much really only have to consider what abilities are going to attack other enemies. So like I mentioned, champions do have that melee AoE abilities that allows them to attack multiple enemies at once. So just make sure you know what skills are going to do that versus the skills that are just going to be a single target hit, which what I mean by that is a hit that'll only hit one enemy versus multiple. That's really the biggest learning curve with champions, but you have to learn that with every class as it is, and it's really not that complicated. In terms of the class role of a champion, they are significantly noted for doing damage, but also, of course, they also have a tanking role as well. But most champions, I would say, for the most part, probably lean more towards the damage role, but over the years, it's kind of changed a lot. So Yes and no. I don't even know what I mean by that, but I would definitely say they are more of a damage role, just at least that's what they were supposed to be, but over the years they've definitely taken on more of a tanking role as well. But they can do either or. In terms of what races can play the champion, the races are as followed. You can play a champion as a dwarf, elf, high elf, hobbit, man, river hobbit, and stout axe. So pretty much all of the races available for you. Now, when it comes to which race is best for the class of champion, I would argue that man is probably your best bet here. Reason being is because they do have a might increase boost. So that's something that you're going to need to focus on as a champion, is to get your might stat up as much as possible. And then they also do have a bonus racial trait or passive one where you can earn evasion, parry, and a block rating percentage increase. So keep that in mind, because that's going to be something as a champion you're definitely going to want to lean on when you can. Not only that, but they do have the virtuous man racial trait available as well, and then that'll grant you confidence for your character for the virtue, which confidence is a trait I would potentially lean into as a champion if I were you. Plus, they do have the most important stat of all, especially as a champion, is a plus 5% damage increase boost on one or two-handed weapons. So that's super critical for a champion. You're either always going to have some sort of sword damage increase specifically with your champion, mostly, unless you want to try a different weapon like a hammer or so, but that's sort of up to you. Speaking on the weapons, here are the weapon proficiencies for a champion. You can wield daggers. I know, crazy, right? Daggers? Dual wielding obviously is something that is available to a champion. You can have one-handed axes, one-handed clubs, one-handed hammers, one-handed maces, swords. You gotta get the picture. And then something that will unlock to you later with the champion is that you will have access to a bow or crossbow. Now, you will get a skill that will allow you to essentially use a bow, but it's really like nothing crazy. You're not gonna be like a hunter with like a whole range of like class skills, really. It's just going to be like, hey, I want to aggro you, let me shoot my bow so that I can aggro this enemy over. But it's like maybe like a -7 on the damage scale. It's so light. It's nothing. And then at level 10, you'll have access to spears, two-handed axes, two-handed clubs, hammers, and swords. So you get a lot of things. You do not get a shield as a champion, believe it or not. They actually changed that over the years, I believe. But if they did have a shield now, they would probably be like one of the most OP classes. So I think that's why they don't give y'all a shield. Y'all are great enough as a champion. You're gonna live at everything pretty much, so you're good. And then one last thing I want to talk about with champions before we get into the virtues and the class trait trees for champions is there is this basic skill called fervor. I believe, if I'm saying it right, fever. It sounds like fever, but I think it's fervor. I don't know. But this essentially is almost like a build-up ability, almost think of like the hunter's focus ability, where, you know, if they use focus, they'll be able to have better hitting skills available to them, or, you know, do more damage in general. And with the champion, it's kind of the same thing. If you use this like almost like anger or rage driven passive skill bonus, then you'll be able to have more skills with higher damage increase unlocked for you. So just kind of keep it in mind. You can actually see it on the bottom of your toolbar. It'll be above the automatic auto weapon attack button, so just kind of keep that in mind for you as well. All right, guys, I think I covered it all, but let's go into what virtues you should have for a champion and what the class trait trees are, and then go over a little bit of stat stuff you should know. So let's take a look at the stats that you need to know for champions. So it looks like for champions, might is actually going to be your biggest stat that you want to keep an eye on. Might increases your physical mastery, critical rating, physical mitigations, tactical mitigation, outgoing healing, and parry rating, which means that you should basically be dealing more physical damage, which as a more melee based character and someone who needs more melee damage, physical mastery does include that. So super important there. Crit is also good for you as well. And then also anything to help you avoid taking as much damage, like physical mitigation or tactical mitigation referred to, that actually will help you with your champion too. And then of course parrying is really good. Outgoing healing not so much for you, I guess, but that is super nice. Agility is also something that you might just want to try to work on a little bit, just because of the finesse and parry rating, honestly. But I would just mainly focus on might here. Might is typically the go-to for most heavy armor classes, which you are as a champion. And then also vitality is another stat that you can probably focus on, especially if you're going to go with a tank champ. You'll definitely want a lot of health where you can get it. Let's take a look at the virtues you will need for your champion. So first thing I would say is definitely zeal is going to be your best bet because it's the only virtue that allows you to slot might. So let's just plop that in there. But of course there is physical mastery and critical rating for you. So that means with the critical rating, you'll probably do a more devastating hit. The chances are increased that you could be doing really high hitting damage one time. And physical mastery just overall will increase your melee damage in general and also your range, but you really only have a bow and arrow, so it's not that big of a deal. And then the next virtue I would focus on personally is also Valor, again, because it has physical mastery rating and crit, but then there's also Finesse, which will help you out as well with your champion. Here I also go with Wit because it has Finesse, critical, and physical and tactical mastery. I always go for physical and tactical mastery because that will increase your overall damage, like I've mentioned, for your melee or ranged attacks. So I always try to prioritize those stats and then whatever the important stats for your class are. So that's the three kind of main I would go through for sure with a champion. These are like the three main virtues I would personally focus. Now, I will say the only virtue I don't have available on this character, because she's a very elderly character, we'll say, is confidence, which I would highly suggest that you slot confidence in for your champions. Reason being is because there's critical rating and finesse and evasion. Evasion will also be super vital for you as a champion. So something as well as a champion you'll also want to keep in mind is evasion and parrying where you can. So parry, it provides a chance to completely avoid an enemy's attack or a partial chance of avoiding an enemy's attack and reduces the damage taken from a particularly avoided attack. And evasion can do the exact same things as well. So hopefully this will allow you to essentially miss an opponent's attack. And we don't have a block rating because guess what? We don't have a shield, but these are almost like your alternatives. So hopefully this will kind of provide you with a little bit more of stability, I guess, in terms of avoiding attacks, but also increasing your chances of the enemy not avoiding yours. So that's sort of the big thing between evasion and also with finesse. So when it comes down to another virtue I would slot in, confidence, like I mentioned as well, especially for the crit. But I would also possibly go with loyalty here because it will increase your overall health. And there is armor value as well as incoming healing. So that'll help you, especially in a tanking manner. If you do decide to tank or just in a solo manner, I would go with this too. So overall, the 5 virtues I would personally slot in for champion would be zeal, valor, wit as your like top 3, like always go with those, and then loyalty and confidence personally is what I would say. I honestly too wouldn't go against determination here either, just because like agility can kind of help you out a little bit as a champion, but like it's not your main stat. But the physical mastery rating on top of the crit could... That dwarf moan was crazy. As I was saying though, the determination with the agility, which increases your physical mastery there, and physical mastery rating goes up as well, and critical rating. Pretty good for a champion. Not a bad pick there either. I also would say that Innocence isn't a bad pick here either because of the resistance rating, but also because of the physical and tactical mitigation. So that is also another thing that you could do here too. So just overall as a recap, I would do zeal, valor, wit, loyalty, and confidence if I were you. But if you do want to change up either confidence or loyalty, the 2 end ones, you could always do innocence or even determination if you want to go a little bit out of it. In terms of the class trait trees, we have 3 as always. We have the martial champion, which is basically your tanking section or class tier. This is a damage soaking warrior who knows the best defense is a strong offense. So what you'll see here with a lot of it is that you do have increased percentage in physical mitigation. Tactical mitigation means you can take on a little bit more, and then you will also actually get a bubble. So keep that in mind. You get a little bubble as a champion, at least a good one, and it adds 1 fervor pip Oh yeah, which the fervor or whatever, the meter is right there for you. But also it'll increase your threat, so it'll allow you to aggro more, hopefully, and you'll passively gain plus 20% of morale. This is like your primary tanking class tier, like I've mentioned, but there are a lot of great perks from this, and this isn't a bad line to go with as well if you find any challenge along the way for any enemies you're dealing with in the main open landscape. So keep that in mind. It's good for soloing or for raiding, but this is primarily used for raiding lately. And then there is Redline, the Berserker, which deals single target damage, crit-based melee damage, to be specific. So yeah, you'll deal a burst of single target high damage, relying on a high crit chance to do massive damage, aka why we want more critical rating, but just overall it can't hurt you as a champ. But there are some cool DPS skills, and then you will definitely have a lot of your critical rating, like higher ranked, at least devastating hits will be more plausible for you. And then Yellow Line is the Deadly Storm. It deals a whirling AoE destruction upon foes or whirling. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk today. I'm so sorry, guys. But this is more of like your AoE based champion. Over the years, I know that they've definitely decreased the amount of AoE abilities you get with the champion and put them mostly into Yellow Line. So it is kind of unfortunate that they've done it that way, in my opinion. But Yellow Line is also good for pretty much just doing any soloing along the way with this class. So it does use a wide array of AoE attacks, like Blade Storm, which is super duper important, and Rend. So if you do want to attack more types of enemies at the same time and do more damage, this is sort of the line you would go with. This is kind of an odd one because these are kind of really the 3 class trait trees that really have more separation, I guess. Like a lot of the other classes we've looked at, it's normally like, oh, this is your tank and your warrior, and the yellow just kind of like helps out with doing either or, right? But in this case, it kind of gives you a little bit of damage buffs, but in different ways, right? Like a tank is going to actually not really so much have a damage buff, but it's going to be more along the lines of buffing your armor, at least buffing your way of attacking, and also aggroing. And then Redline is like more critical based melee damage, and then yellow is just like more attacking other foes at the same time damage. So it's kind of up to you on your play style. I've definitely geared more towards a Redline champion, but I love me some AoE. So Yellow Line's not a bad pick here either. Just overall kind of depends on what your stance is on the champion. I think that's why they're probably one of the more liked classes, because I do feel like they do have more distinct class tiers and just different playstyles in general from those class tiers. But that is all. I hope that you enjoyed this champion guide and it gave you some understanding of what you can expect from champions. And overall, what are your thoughts on the champion class? Is this something that you're looking at trying in LOTR, or is this something that you're like, I don't know why people still play champions in this day and age? I definitely mained a champion for a long time myself, but I hardly touch them now. But they're still really OP in terms of just like, you know, AoE damage, especially when it comes to tanking. Let me know if you have any questions down below as well. And of course, you better stay weird, you weird weirdos.